All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dave Laubscher. I'm part of the Lenovo Briefing Center here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us today. I think we've got a good group assembled. We'll get things started. Our topic today is one of our series that we've entitled Business Continuity, which I think is a general area of a lot of interest these days. And today we're going to focus in on our solutions for supporting remote work environments. Again, a topic which I think is quite timely, and I think it'll be an interesting discussion as we go through the next 30, 40 minutes or so. So this is, as I said, I'm part of our executive briefing center. It's the center itself is a little quiet these days, but we look forward to a time in the future where we can host folks and bring you all back together with us here in Raleigh. Today's session is going to be recorded, so fair warning on that. But the good thing is that you do have access then if you want to go back and listen to it again, or perhaps with some other folks in your organization that you think might benefit from listening in on the discussion. It is available there, as well as the rest of the series that we have with our business continuity discussions and all the other virtual briefings we do from the Briefing Center. So that's a great link for more resources there. And then the last link you see there is our email address at the Briefing Center. If you feel that this is a discussion today that you might like to get to a next level on, and maybe sort of have a more customized discussion with us on some of the elements around this, or really anything else that you'd like to discuss with us when it comes to these kinds of solutions, and we'd be happy to set up a follow-up session, a one-on-one discussion where we can really target into the things that you're most interested in. So feel free to leave us an email there, and we'll get back to you and set up some follow-on sessions here. Is a little bit of housekeeping here. So if you're not familiar with the GoToWebinar tool, a couple of things to highlight here. You can see there you've got a handouts section on the right-hand side in your control button or control panel there. We've got some of the handouts today. A couple of white papers on some of the solutions that we'll be talking about. There's also a flyer there for the rest of these sessions on business continuity, and of course a copy of the charts that we'll be using to aid our discussion today. So feel free to download those at any time. And then there's also a questions panel at the bottom. So because these can tend to be fairly large audiences, unfortunately everyone comes in muted to try to keep the conversation flowing. But if you do have questions while we're not talking, and it's a little hard for the person who's actually talking to be looking at the questions at the same time, but for those of us on the panel that aren't talking, we'll be able to kind of keep an eye on those questions, and we'll try to respond as we go through the time that we have today. If we don't get to it, we will be able to follow up with you via email as well. So feel free to ask any questions you'd like through that questions panel. We'll do our best to get to you and give you the information that you're looking for. Okay, so that's kind of the housekeeping. Let me introduce a little bit about who we're going to be having our discussion with today. For those that are live today, you get the advantage of actually seeing the live web cameras as well. Not available on the recording, but for those that are here today, Don Frame is one of our panelists for the day. Don's our brand director for our data center group here in North America. So Don, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Sure, my pleasure. And then taking the user's perspective, you'll see as we get into this, Jonathan Pollock from our commercial client devices organization. Jonathan, thanks also for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And then finally, Jeff Huxtable. Jeff leads our marketing work for our VDI solutions.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we'll kind of get into different conversations as we go through this with the different folks in their areas of expertise. But Don, I kind of wanted to start with you because I know from a general perspective, remote work is one of those things that has got a lot of attention these days, and some of us, we kind of think of it as, yeah, we take our laptop out of the bag, we open it up, we can do email, we can do e-meetings, but there's a lot more to it than that, right? And there's a lot of things that I think people are wrestling with in terms of, security and even just access to certain applications that they may not have, at home that they had at the office. So, talk a little bit about, if you will, about some of the things that customers are wrestling with and some of the challenges that we're trying to help out with.
Got it, Dave. Yeah, client virtualization VDI, Dave, solves for a lot of different reasons from a business perspective. There's a lot of reasons why customers are implementing client virtualization or have in the past. Obviously, because of COVID-19, there's been a renewed focus on being able to provide two pieces of that equation, David. One is mobility, and that's the thing we highlighted on the chart here in the top right. Obviously, that's the big one. How do we enable all of our employees to work remotely? How do they get access to the data that they need? How do they do it on the right device? There's the sense of what kind of user am I and what device am I going to need? Jonathan is going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, but it's not just about a single device. We want to enable multiple devices. And David, there's also the element on the device side of disaster recovery. We're out working remotely. We don't have access to our help desks internally. What happens if my primary system gets damaged? Client virtualization enables BYOD of multiple devices. So, it is largely about how do we enable that end user. That's one big piece of the puzzle. The other side, David, is how do we maintain CIO policy, information policy? How do we maintain data security? How do we get the applications to the users that need them and the ones that they need and not bomb them with everything? And then how do we centrally manage it, David? You think about we want to enable remote work. That means people out there accessing information, consuming information all over the place, David. But what about the data control, right? So the client virtualization on the back end, one of the biggest advantages, David, is the centralization of the security, also the centralization of the backup of that data, David. Data is the most important asset that any environment, any endeavor has, any enterprise has. Doesn't matter if it's a business, education, healthcare, it doesn't matter. Data is the most important asset. So while we want to enable it to be accessed everywhere on any device, David, we also have to protect it.
Don, it seems like those are some of the things we think about in the data center every day: security, backup, data protection, data access. It's almost like we're taking a lot of those elements from the data center and we're extending that reach out to the client devices that everyone has in their home these days as we all do this remote work. And I would expect that from a Lenovo perspective, we probably are pretty uniquely positioned because of the breadth of the offerings that we have to kind of look at this from a more holistic point of view.
That's exactly right, David. Lenovo's strategy, long-term strategy, has been to be a provider of solutions from device to edge to core to cloud. There's a number of acquisitions, David, we've done over the last few years of Motorola Mobility, of IBM's server business, and all of that was to put us in a position to be that end-to-end solution provider. So, David, we see here today Lenovo as the new Lenovo, as one of the only companies in the world. In fact, for client virtualization, I would say maybe the only company in the world that can do device to edge to core to data center solutions for client virtualization, David. Where you think about dealing with one provider end to end, there may be some significant advantages to the outcome of the experience of that solution. And I mean the experience from the end user all the way back to the administrator, and then the experience and the control point for your CTO or your CIO at a company.
Yes, it's putting together a complete VDI solution has got a lot of different aspects to it. So clearly, we want to kind of go through this conversation today and kind of pick some of these pieces apart and kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive on it. And to do that, I'd like to get started kind of with the endpoints, because I think, at least for me, it's the most obvious thing, because it's the device that's sitting right in front of me. And so I think having the right endpoint for the type of work that I do, or the different device perhaps for the type of work somebody else does, is a really important piece of it. So I want to bring Jonathan in here to kind of take that end user viewpoint, if you will, the user perspective, and take us through a little bit more detail about how we look at that end of it.
Sure, thanks, David. I appreciate it. And we start with this image here. Go back one, actually. I think this is one that we can all relate to. Somebody sitting at home at a desk. Now, this is a very clean picture. I'll be honest, my desk is always not always this clean, and sometimes I'm running from room to room to get away from screaming kids and things like that. But I think we can all relate to working from home now, and we're working in places where I never thought I'd need to work. So this is certainly exciting. And to your point earlier, we're all using likely a notebook working from home, right? It's something we can all relate to. So on the next slide, what I'll do is I'll get started with a little bit of survey data to help ground us in terms of where we are today. And this is certainly interesting to me to hear that only 56% of employees say that they have the necessary tools to work from home. Now, it depends if you're a half full or half empty type of person, but 56% is pretty strong, but really that means that roughly half of employees don't have the tools that they need to be productive at home, and that's certainly an opportunity for Lenovo to provide those tools for our customers. It's also interesting to note that less than half of employees report that they are as productive at home as they are in the office. Now, I can certainly say that I'm included in this 46%. Probably has a lot to do with running around from room to room, as I mentioned earlier, but that's certainly the case. But there is a minority of the workforce, 15%, that report they're actually more productive at home. That is often a result of not having to commute, or maybe there's even less distractions at home. But I think what we can certainly all agree on is there's a sense that this work from home movement is going to be more permanent than maybe we thought when this started. In fact, 77% of companies say that they're actually more willing to let their customers work from home now after this COVID pandemic, and this is likely to extend going forward.
That's a significant number, 77% seeing this as a more kind of permanent shift in the way we do things. I got to imagine that must, from a Lenovo perspective, kind of change the way we look at our user community and kind of the way we want our devices to line up in that regard.
That's exactly right. So as you may know, we have a very large client portfolio, and we've designed that portfolio over the years to map to certain personas. So you can see here that we have quite a variety of personas, and then there's in between in each and every one of them. But there's desk dwellers, for example. These are typical users that are sitting at their desk most of their day. They could be doing data entry, things like that, but they're not moving very much. They may prefer a desktop PC over a notebook PC where mobility is not important. And then you see up at the top, we have personas like tech enthusiasts. These are employees that want to embrace the latest and greatest technology. Think the people trying AR and VR, to do their job, to get things done very new. They want to try something new every single day. We have road warriors, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. These are people that are traveling every single day. So long battery life, thin and light devices are clearly very, very important to them. But what we've seen is this COVID pandemic has shifted these personas almost overnight to an exclusive work from home persona. So we had always planned around a certain percentage of our workforce, of our customers, needing to work from home. But this has shifted very significantly overnight to almost exclusively work from home. Now, we hope that all that changes in the near future, but this has been a big shift. And honestly, this is why our customers are so interested in VDI, because it gives us that mobility and that flexibility that we have. We can change quickly, rapidly, and scale quickly, which we'll get into a little bit later. So maintaining employee experience, this is critical to business. Most of you have probably realized that your company has invested significantly in employee experience over the past few years. That's likely been in the office. I know that Lenovo's office building has undergone a tremendous transformation in the past few years. We've gone from assigned desks to hoteling, more huddle rooms, open landscapes, very different and new and unique. But that's the type of investment that our customers are making to enhance and maintain employee experience. But now our customers need to do the same to maintain that experience at home. They've been so focused on the office building, but again, this situation has caused us to shift to home. So for example, having access to my work, obviously that's critical. That's a basic piece that needs to happen to enable people to work from home. But management and control, this is also very important, and also this relates to security as well. We need to be able to manage these devices and maintain security from home. And then creative workers, these are the type of workers that traditionally would be working face-to-face, but they need the collaboration tools necessary to collaborate with their colleagues and ultimately generate the creative content that their job requires. And then road warriors, this is probably the most challenging, I'll call it persona of all, because these folks are used to being on the road, 4 or 5 days a week, meeting face-to-face with customers, and they're not able to do that anymore. So again, these use of collaboration tools are critical to allow them to get their job done.
So Jonathan, there's a lot of questions. There are a lot of challenges we have to address. Talk a little bit about how some of the tools, some of the devices kind of match up to those things.
Yeah, sure. So, I use Microsoft Teams almost, most of my day. I'm using Microsoft Teams to collaborate with my colleagues. Typically I would have met face-to-face in a conference room for meetings and things like that, but we've embraced the Teams transition. I'm using, my notebook to do that primarily, but also many accessories, which we'll get into a little bit later. But Teams is enabling me to collaborate and work with my colleagues in many ways. And it's not Teams is what I use, but when I meet with customers and partners, obviously there's many other options as well. So here you see a very, I'll call it high-level view of Lenovo's client device portfolio. I can oftentimes spend a full 8-hour day actually reviewing the entire portfolio. It's very large. For those of you that don't know, Lenovo is the #1 PC manufacturer in the world. About 1 out of every 4 PCs is manufactured by Lenovo. And then if you were to segment that to the commercial view, it's even significantly higher than that. So the result is we have a very large and broad client portfolio. And that what I mean by that is we have a form factor, no matter what your job is, no matter what your persona is, we have a client to fit your needs. You'll see some examples here on this chart. On the right side, we have a desktop computer the size of a cell phone. It's called the ThinkCentre Nano. It's very new, but it can literally fit in your pocket, and it is a desktop PC that you can take from room to room, house to house, or whatever it may be. In the middle, you have one of our Think Vision visuals. Second monitors are very important to our customers, and as you can imagine, we have a very large portfolio of monitors. The one that I really like to use is the mobile monitor, the M14. This is a monitor that weighs less than 2 pounds. It's 14 inches. It's USB-C. I can plug it into my device and use it even without power. It's fantastic and has really helped my productivity at home. We have a very wide variety of ThinkPads. These are the traditional commercial laptops that many of you are familiar with. You're pictured here is the X1 Carbon, which I happen to be using today, which is my personal favorite. And then on the left, we even have mobile workstations, which are very powerful mobile workstation PCs that have dedicated GPUs and high-powered CPUs in them. But the net of it is we have a client device for every use case that's required. So I mentioned that collaboration tools are critical. They certainly are. I mean, I mentioned that I use Teams almost every single day, which I absolutely do. And my laptop has really become a mobile conferencing hub. I can use it for any collaboration tool, just about, and I certainly do every day. I mentioned that those Think Vision visuals, that I used to not use a second monitor at home, to be very honest, because I would typically take meetings at night or maybe very early in the morning at home, but most of my meetings happened during the workday where I was in the office. But when this, the COVID situation happened, I very quickly needed to source a second monitor, and that was really important for me. But something that may not come to mind is audio and visual experience. This is critical to collaboration and communication. I use my laptop as a phone. It has replaced the business phone for me. And what some people may not realize is the amount of investments that we have made into things like microphones and screens. For example, the PC that I'm talking to you on today has 4 different microphones in it. Those 4 microphones are designed to deliver an optimized audio experience across all of the collaboration tools such as Teams, WebEx, Zoom, etc. And also displays. So displays are obviously very important to our end users. It's what they look at every single day. And we've started to put 4K OLED displays in our business notebooks. Previously this was technology that was reserved for very high-end TVs and cinema experience, but it's so important to our customers that are looking at these displays all day, every day, that we've invested significant time and effort to make sure that we're delivering the best audio and video experience for our customers. So Dave, I hope that's given you a quick overview of the client devices that we have and the choices that we give to our customers.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jonathan. It does give us a good picture, and there's a lot of things in there that honestly I probably wasn't thinking as much about 3 weeks ago in terms of the mics and some of the speakers and some of those aspects. And I know certainly having a second monitor at home has been really helpful. So a lot of interesting things to think about and keep in mind in this remote work type of environment. The other thing we probably don't think as much about from a user perspective is the IT perspective, right? The things that are going on behind the scenes and kind of down the wire, if you will, that enables us to get access to the applications and the data and things that we need. So I want to bring Jeff in for the IT perspective. And Jeff, I know Don mentioned security. I know you've got some interesting data about security.
Yeah, so, with IT departments, remote work projects have obviously increased in priority with this pandemic, with the stay-in-place orders that a lot of areas have. And what they're finding is that, the crisis came on so quickly that a lot of companies had to scramble in order to set up any kind of a remote work solution for their employees. And it might have been VPNs, it might have been sending the person take their PC from work, take it home so that they could work from home. But what we're seeing out in the industry right now is using Zoom, let's say, for teleconferencing and that. We're seeing the Zoom bombing where there's cyber attacks into the Zoom application. VPN phishing, so people think that they're logging into their VPN when they're really being phished, and then that opens up the corporate network to thieves and that kind of stuff. And then of course, there's a lot of industries that have requirements for their data, HIPAA protections for healthcare records, and GDPR over in Europe, for data privacy laws that a lot of companies have to maintain. Now, it was interesting. We just had a note from Lenovo Security this week, and I was just stunned by what I read on it and this graph that they provided. What they indicated in this note to every employee was that please be careful. Cyber attacks have really escalated just since the start of the crisis, the pandemic situation. So we were already seeing, as you can see from the chart, an increase year over year of about a doubling of cyber attacks, both from the desktop side as well as the data center side. And just in the past 2 months, though, when this situation has come upon us, we've seen a 50% increase just from in that 2 month period in attacks. So we're seeing it both on the data center side as well as the laptop side, and I think the criminals out there are just trying to take advantage of this situation to profit. Now, the other thing with supporting remote workers that's important, is if you've got multiple devices out there, how do you employ software upgrades, security patches? And one nice thing about the VDI solutions that we're going to show you is that you do have a nice ability to quickly and easily upgrade all the client devices with software upgrades as well as security fixes. And so, you know, it's like the next time that they log on to the system, they'll have that upgraded software available. So it's much more effective than having to worry about different types of devices, and that allows companies actually to have a BYOD or bring your own device kind of policy.
Yeah, I would imagine getting those software upgrades out there on a timely basis has got to be key. You know, that chart is kind of sobering when you look at it that way. You know, I want to come back to one of the charts that we had earlier about how Lenovo kind of then takes all of this together and helps provide the solution, an end-to-end solution for our customer. We kind of talked about the first part of this with Jonathan. I want you to kind of go through a little bit more then about that total infrastructure, because I know it's a lot more than just a server sitting in a rack someplace in terms of how we can help our customers build these kind of environments.
That's true. So, you know, there's several components to a VDI solution on the back end. As you mentioned, there's the software to begin with, the VDI software, but you can also have software for backup and restore of the data that you generate from your VDI engagement. And of course, it's got the infrastructure that it runs on is very important. And then finally, the services to be able to implement the solution and support it as time goes on. Those are all kind of key aspects of the data center offering. And on the next page, I'll highlight that actually of those three, in my mind, the most important is the services engagement, as far as when you have a VDI project, whether it's an upgrade or it's a brand new VDI project, the key for success is having a good design up front. Now, we have a strong services team in the VDI space. They've done 3,000 implementation projects in 2 years, and of that, 850 of those were for VDI. So a large number of client projects around VDI. And those incorporate both you know, design and architecture services, as well as installation services, and then support services on the back end. And then on the next slide, what you'll see are in my mind, the key offerings that the services team has for VDI implementations. The first is the complimentary VDI workshop. So with this workshop, the idea is that they will sit down with you to try and understand your environment and the types of solution that you're looking for, and kind of what are some of the key metrics, the service level agreements, you know, the response times and everything that you're looking for with the system. And then from that, devise a plan, you know, steps that you can take in order to accomplish that goal of yours. So that's what the VDI workshop provides. Now, in this stay in place time, what they've had to do is kind of adjust, because, you know, no longer can our services people visit your sites and have a discussion with you. You can't even meet at a restaurant because everything is closed. And so what we offer now in this kind of environment is we don't want to stop your VDI projects from you know, starting. And so we do offer some remote jumpstart services. So this is where you can sit with or have a couple-hour conversation with a VDI expert on our team to kind of go through the design and architecture of a VDI solution for your environment. And then also, if you do decide to go forward with the VDI implementation, we also have some residency services that are remote. So that's providing over a 2-week period access to a VDI expert to help you with any questions you have and on the different steps that you take in order to implement your VDI in your environment, the VDI solution in your environment. The last service I wanted to mention to you is really also very critical in this time period, and that is, you know, so many companies have been impacted from a revenue perspective. You know, they've seen a slowdown in business, And of course, when you have a slowdown in business with the revenues coming in a little bit lighter than what they normally were, you want to cut back your expenses as well. And one way that we can really help as far as cutting back expenses, even though this is really urgent and you need to implement a remote services, a VDI project, remote worker solution, is we do have TrueScale Services, which is a pay for what you use subscription service. So you still get the hardware infrastructure in your data center, but instead of having one big upfront expense when the system is installed, instead it's more of a subscription service. So you just pay for what you use. So we have billing software in there that can determine, usage of the server resources, and then we just give you a monthly bill for your use. And so it's an OpEx expense instead of a CapEx expense, and it's a much lower expense initially, so we can get through this period together. And then when the economy rebounds, we'll be in much better shape on the other end.
Yeah, Jeff, those are some really interesting offerings, and I really like the ones that we can deliver remotely. I think that's great. And in fact, we had another one of these virtual briefing sessions on that. So anyone who's interested in learning more about those remote offerings, we actually had a conversation with Ben Wang, who is out working with customers, or in this case, across the wire, working with customers to implement some of those things. So I just mentioned that again. We have that link. I'll show it again at the end to the recordings. There was a really great conversation around those. So the other thing I wanted to kind of explore a little bit is that, when we get into these VDI solutions, it's not just sort of from one place that we can get all the things that we need. It's really about partnerships and bringing kind of the leaders in the industry together for our customers. So can you talk a little bit more about it from that perspective?
Sure. So as far as the broker software is concerned, so the software that's actually providing the applications to the virtual desktops, we actually partner with the two industry leaders that have 98% of the market. So Citrix and their virtual apps and desktops application, and then VMware with their Horizon application. Those two applications dominate the market, and they're both they've been around a while. They're very robust applications, supports all different user types, from office worker to knowledge worker to even the power users, and supports it in the devices that they support. It's a very wide range of devices. So they're industry leaders for a reason, and we've been partnering with them for a very long time. Now, when you do get power user type situations, so normally that was CAD CAM, for engineering kind of design. There's also medical imaging. If you look at medical images and that kind of stuff, or even with visualization, 3D visualization and that. These were kind of the power users, and in the past they were kind of restricted to having to work on premise, at work. They couldn't work remotely. Well, Citrix and VMware have been working with CATIA and some of the other graphics application vendors, and they have added support for them, over time. And so now the VDI applications support a wide range of graphics processing, graphics processing use cases. And what really makes the solution work is NVIDIA with their graphical processing units, or GPUs. Not only the hardware that gets installed on the servers, but also the software that makes that interacts with Citrix and VMware and makes everything run much better. So they've got two versions of software. One is for office workers. Like Windows 10 is, if you're not aware, is one of the most graphically intensive operating systems that are out there. And what we're seeing is that if you've got a large number of users on Windows 10, that having a GPU card to accelerate the I/O performance actually can provide better response times for your VDI engagements. And so there's grid software for that. And then the base use case for the power users, the kind of the engineering tools, the Quadra devices and software is what's used for that. And then, of course, with the data that you generate from your VDI desktops, you do want to be able to back them up, protect the data. And so we partner with Veeam, which is a very fast-growing industry partner in the backup and restore space. And so, as you can see, we partner with some very strong industry leaders in all these different categories. Now, if you go to the next page, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that VDI has actually been around a long time. I can remember in the late 2000s that I was working with Citrix, not with the company, but I was partnering with Citrix, and it was Presentation Server at the time. And then it became Zen Desktop, and now it's Virtual Apps and Desktop. So VDI has been around a while, and these two applications have been around a while. And so before the crisis hit, the main reason why customers were, I guess you could say, upgrading or implementing VDI projects is that the software and the systems that they were using were aging out. They were reaching the end of their support cycle. And most of those earlier environments were in a traditional 3-tier, where the VDI application had its own server. Well, now we've got hyperconverged servers, and these are servers where you can virtualize both the compute as well as the storage capacity of the servers and spread it across multiple applications. So instead of the VDI application being the sole application on a server, you can now share a server with the VDI application and other applications, business applications that you use. And what that has done is it has lowered the average cost per desktop. And so our recommended offerings are actually Citrix on ThinkAgile HX. Now these servers are Nutanix-based software, and this is another up-and-coming company and an industry leader in hypervisor and also in server virtualization. And then with VMware, we recommend the ThinkAgile VX, which is based on VMware virtualization. So of course, you can, as you can expect, Horizon has a very tight integration between vSphere and vSAN, and also the ESXi hypervisor that VMware offers. And so those are our two recommended offerings, Citrix on ThinkAgile HX and VMware on ThinkAgile VX. Now on the next chart, I'll go into a little more detail on a couple of these solutions. So first, on the VMware side, I already mentioned that Horizon is tightly integrated with vSphere, vSAN, and other VMware virtualization technologies. The other tight integration that we have with this solution is that Lenovo X Clarity, which is our systems management software, is very tightly integrated into VMware vCenter. So that's a higher level management software. So you get a single pane of glass to kind of manage your entire environment. Now, with this solution and the others that I'll show you, we do have a solution brief. It's available as part of this webcast, but it's also can be found at lenovopress.com. But we have a solution brief for VMware Horizon, which kind of outlines all the different solution offerings that we have around VMware Horizon. And then on the next page where I talk to you about the Citrix, we also have a solution brief for Citrix as well on lenovopress.com. Now, with the VDI on hyperconverged infrastructure, there really isn't a need in most cases for external storage, because with the increases in technology and advancement over the last several years, our high volume server, as an example, can have up to 3 terabytes of storage on it. And if you reserve, 5 gigabytes for every office worker or knowledge worker that you have in your company, that means 600 employees can be supported on a box. But right now, the processor capability only supports more like 200 to 300. And so what we're seeing is that the storage requirements for the VDI implementations can actually be done solely with internal storage. Now, if you are in a power user environment, there's a situation where you probably do need additional storage, or also if you want to do backup and restore off of the VDI, the desktops, to make sure that the data's held safely. That's another situation where storage can be implemented. Now, with this Citrix Nutanix offering, there's really a couple great things about it. Besides, you know, the ability to share the compute and storage processing power with other applications, and also the easy deployment, spin up and spin down of virtual desktops. On the next page, we have a very unique offering with Citrix and Nutanix, and that's the Nutanix Instant On capability. So with this capability, we actually still have the hardware in the data center. So the ThinkAgile HX devices are in the data center, but the control of those devices is in the Citrix cloud. And so if you need to spin up or spin down virtual desktops, you can do that very quickly. The nice thing is you can actually set up a template. So you can have a template for a certain type of user, let's say your finance users. You can have another template for your human resources users, another template for your product development users. And as you need more people, more desktops spun up, let's say in finance, you just add 10 of the finance templates and get that spin up very quickly. Now, this solution right here is great for if you don't have a large IT staff. So either your IT staff is focused on other, more strategic priorities, or, you just don't have a very big IT staff to begin with, and you need some easier management capability. This provides management through the cloud. And so it's just an interesting solution that's very unique to Citrix and Nutanix. And actually another reason why we really recommend Citrix on the Nutanix ThinkAgile HX products.
Yeah, Jeff, this one sounds really interesting too, because I'm sure there's a lot of folks out here that, the VDI wasn't probably a key priority until recently. And so this seems like an easy way to get started quickly and kind of get things rolling, because it's providing a lot of that infrastructure almost kind of ready-made in the cloud, but still being able to run that workload on-prem. So this one's probably really timely. And I wanted to go back to the power user, because I think it's an interesting one. Jonathan mentioned earlier on about some of the great mobile workstations, for example. You've got some great end user devices that have that advanced graphics capability, but like you were saying, not everybody either has those devices or has those devices, at their home remote work location. And so let's go a little bit deeper then on kind of how we can provide some of that capability through VDI for some of those users.
Sure. So let me give you a couple of examples where a VDI solution for power users would really be beneficial. So the first is, let's say when this stay-at-home or stay-in-place kind of orders are over and we can return to the office. If you have an engineer, let's say, doing a automobile design, let's say, on their workstation, and then they want to go to a meeting to kind of show the latest design that they've come up with to teammates and to management or executives, what they could do is actually just, put their workstation on hold and then go in with a laptop into the meeting room and then show folks off of the laptop or projected onto the screen their design that they have right now on their workstation. So that's one where added flexibility is provided by VDI. The second kind of solution that's really kind of come up since this whole pandemic kind of started is we've got a lot of universities that are now having to remotely conduct classes. And for lectures, that's no problem, right? You have a Zoom, you have a WebEx or some other sort of collaborative software to hold those meetings. But what about the labs? what we're getting is a lot of university interest in the capability of providing their labs to their students over, on a remote basis as well. And this is where VDI is a great solution for it. Because as I mentioned, both Citrix and VMware have invested heavily in recent years in making sure that applications like CATIA, SolidWorks, Siemens NX, Schlumberger Petrol, Autodesk, that all of these applications are supported in a VDI environment. And but now they don't really work great unless we have some acceleration capability in the server. And that acceleration comes from NVIDIA GPUs, and it also comes from NVIDIA GPU software. And so that kind of complete solution where you have the server, you have the GPUs in the server, and the GPU software in addition to either VMware or Citrix, that complete solution that you have there is ideal for these university labs. It's also ideal for your engineers on staff and other medical imaging kind of uses. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the Windows 10 desktops, they are more graphically intensive. And so where we have large installations of VDI, large numbers of VDI desktops, we've seen some customers implement some, not the high-end GPUs, but some lower-level GPUs to provide that extra boost in performance so that they can have very fast response times for their customers. So a bunch of different cases for graphics acceleration and GPUs in the solution.
All right, that's great, Jeff. I appreciate that. I think it kind of underlines some of the flexibility that we have when we're building this infrastructure and kind of some of the reach that we can get into some areas that maybe we didn't necessarily think of before when we talked about VDI. It seems like it's a much broader capability than we've ever had before in the industry, and certainly a big role that Lenovo can play to help our customers solve for that solution. So I appreciate you kind of taking the infrastructure perspective on that. Let me bring Don back in. I know, Don, you've been listening into this whole conversation as well. So what kind of stands out to you from what we've been talking about?
So David, there's two big things. I would say the experience for the user. So client virtualization solutions are much different than the past. We can enable that experience on any device, and it also then gives that end user quick disaster recovery, right, David? So if I have a device that goes down, I can get my other device. I can be back up based on my persona of my work. I can get the applications and data that I need. So that's kind of one from a user experience. And also heard Jeff and Jonathan talk a lot about the power user, the user that needs intense, has a workload that has intense graphics, David. Typically, client virtualization was like, oh, you can't do that, right? And so, now with some of the solutions we have and with partnership with NVIDIA, as Jeff talked about, we can enable those rich experiences. So I think from the end user side, there's a lot of advantages, obviously, there. The other thing that, David, that I heard and I keyed off of, though, was the pressure that puts now on the infrastructure side, right? So we have an explosion of remote work. We have an explosion, David, of sharing data outside of our control on all these devices. And as Jeff pointed out, that's led to an explosion of cyber attacks and other issues. So we can't let that go uncontrolled and unchecked. Client virtualization allows us, David, to allow all of that sharing, but have central management and control of the data. So that data is virtualized out, but maintained centrally, backed up centrally. So as we try to maintain the explosion of all of these things that really stress out the IT director and her staff, we need some way of reeling it back in, allowing the rich and expensive workload outside of our data center or our corporate walls, if you will, but we got to control it, David, and client virtualization now allows us to do that.
All right, that's great, Don. I appreciate you kind of summarizing and kind of pulling it all together. Thanks for spending the time with us today. Jonathan and Jeff, again, appreciate you guys adding your perspectives on this. I think it's clearly an important topic, one I think that a lot of folks are interested in, and a place that we can really provide a lot of value. There are some places that you can go for some additional information. So Jeff mentioned the Lenovo Press. Lenovo Press is a great resource for a lot of things like reference architectures and details on our overall solution. So you see the link there for that. Certainly your Lenovo business partner or Lenovo sales rep can get you a lot more information on the things that we've talked about today. And if you're interested in just kind of getting that broader perspective, I've also got a link here to our client virtualization and infrastructure solutions website. And there's a lot of good assets and good information there as well. And again, if you're interested in exploring a little bit more on the whole virtual briefing calendar that we have here, focused in on business continuity, I did mention the one that we did just last week on VDI as well. Jeff mentioned some of those remote services capabilities. That recording is out there. We also did one a little bit earlier. Jeff also mentioned some of the integration with xClarity. We actually demonstrated some of that integration into vCenter a little bit earlier this week. That recording is out there as well. And then going forward, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the HX and VX solutions that Jeff mentioned actually coming up on Monday. And then the last two focusing in more on the data side of things, data protection, and some of the things that are kind of important from that perspective. So look forward to seeing folks a little further down the line in some of those conversations. And of course, looking forward to seeing folks back in the briefing center one of these days. Again, the link there for more information about our briefing center, the link to the recordings. Today's session will be out there hopefully a little bit later on this afternoon, if not certainly by Monday. And then of course, if you're interested in having a more tuned conversation with the folks that you saw today, or any of our other experts, please drop us an email for the briefing center. We'd be happy to set something up. So thanks again to all the panelists for our discussion today. Thanks to everyone who was listening, both live and as we go down the road on the recordings. We look forward to helping our customers really take advantage of some of this technology and drive some of the advantages that we've been talking about. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks a lot.